June 6th, 2014, the 70th anniversary of D-Day. D-Day veterans participated in this ceremony. 70 years ago, on the 6th of June 1944, more than 150,000 men and women were preparing to take part in an operation that marked the start of the end of World War II, Operation Overlord. Still today, it's the largest seaborne military operation the world has ever seen.
At the beginning of World War II, Germany invaded Poland, causing France and Great Britain to declare war on Germany. By the spring of 1940, the German army was ready to invade France, a country defended by not only the French military, but by a sizable British force as well. Within 6 weeks, the Germans defeated the Allies and seized control of France. The United States President Franklin D. Roosevelt wanted to form an operation to gain back France from the Germans. From 1942, the US had pressed the British for an attack, and the need for one became imminent, as the Battle of Stalingrad ensued in late 1942. During World War II, the Soviet Union lost 1/5 of its population to the war. Its leader, Joseph Stalin, needed the Allies to create another front in the west of Europe to relieve his own army, because the battle was costly for Russia. At that time, Nazi communications were kept secret by the famous Enigma code. Nobody could crack it. However, British professor Alan Turing cracked Enigma successfully with the support of his research group.
4 minutes north and altimeter 1 degree west.
Turns out that's the only German you need to know to break Enigma.
Yes! Thanks to Turing, the Allies now had the Enigma code. The Allies used it to gather a lot of intelligence on Nazi Germany, especially about U-boats. By 1944, the Germans knew that the Allies, now including the United States, among others, would attempt an invasion of France to liberate Europe from Germany. The Allied forces, based in Britain, decided to begin the invasion by landing a huge army at a place called Normandy Beach, which is located on the northwest coast of France. Thousands of lives were at stake. The locations and dates had to be kept secret. Therefore, a plan of misleading the Germans as to where and when the invasion would take place was put forth. The Allies needed to be sure of the geographical information of Normandy. They needed to know where the Nazis were and the locations of landmines. They sent frogmen to get sand samples from the beaches, which were patrolled by German sentries. French patriots produced maps with markings such as anti-tank ditch around strong points. The United States chose General Eisenhower to lead the invasion. The Allied ground forces commander was British General Bernard Montgomery. Together, the two planned an attack by the code name Operation Overlord. A huge invasion was going to begin.
The D-Day strategy was to begin with paratroopers dropping into France by moonlight in the late evening or early morning. Their goal was to take over the bridges and roads that the Germans could use to move to the battlefields once the invasion began. The rest of the troops would land on 5 beaches. The British Army would land in the east on beaches with code name Sword and Gold. The Canadians would invade Juno Beach. Omaha and Utah Beach would be invaded by the American Army. Just before midnight on June 5th, more than 20,000 airborne troops parachuted into France to capture the bridges and roads to complete their goal. Even though the paratroopers were scattered compared to where they were supposed to drop, It worked out for the better. The scattering confused the enemy by not allowing them to have an idea of the size or scope of the invasion. Most of the tanks that were transported to Normandy never made it to shore. The Germans shot mortar shells at the boats and the canvas bombers that were decided to float the tanks onto the beach.
Utah Beach had appeared to be the most difficult of the 5 beaches. It had turned out to be the easiest and least costly. The first infantry assault encountered much less enemy fire than what was thought to have happened. The maps used by the troops were wrong. They later found out that they had landed a mile off course. Where they were supposed to land was heavily defended and many would have died. 36 square miles of French soil was liberated at Utah Beach at the cost of fewer than 200 infantry soldiers' lives. Omaha Beach was the most difficult part of the invasion. Soldiers were brought down under the water to drown by the tide. Their equipment and soaked pack could pin them to the ocean floor. Some soldiers risked their lives to try and save others by jumping in the water to pull them ashore. Germans mowed down the brave ones trying to save the drowning, and the drowning just tried to stay alive.
Sword Beach suffered 650 casualties. The attack began an hour later than that of Omaha and Utah because of patches of quicksand. The troops had to wait for the tide to rise higher to cover the quicksand, so boats, amphibious vehicles, and men could make it to shore. British and Canadian soldiers by nightfall were linked up in a continuous front 4 to 6 miles inland from Gold to Juno Beach. The Allies landed at Normandy successfully and headed toward Caen. German Field Marshal Ivan Rommel was sent to France to reorganize the Channel's defenses. He rightfully said, "The war will be won or lost on the beaches. The first 24 hours of the invasion will be decisive."
And after the Battle of Caen and other battles, Paris was liberated. D-Day was the beginning of the end for not only the Germans, but Hitler most of all. D-Day forced the Germans to fight a two-front war again, just as they had in World War I. Yet again, the Germans could not handle war fronts on both East and West.
For the Nazi
On the
Yodel,
9th of
and
May,
it was, to admit his
1945,
country's guilt
Germany
and
surrendered. Soon, the Japanese also surrendered. It was the end of the Axis. Even now, the invasion of Normandy still influences us. Veterans are remembered. Every year, everywhere, every time, there are a lot of memorial events for those who fought in this battle. Also, we have a variety of games, books, and documentaries about World War II and the invasion of Normandy. Perhaps the greatest battle the world has known.
We should honor those who fought the war, just as Obama said on the D-Day 70th anniversary. These men waged war so that we might know peace. They sacrificed so that we might be free. They fought in hopes of a day when we no longer need to. We are grateful to them.